Welcome to Break Free from Corporate, the only podcast dedicated to bringing you business success secrets from leading entrepreneurs with one thing in common. They left the corporate world, became their own boss, and are now living incredible lives. To access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.
Welcome, everyone. This is Gavin Sequeira from Break Free from Corporate, and welcome again to another one of our podcasts. I'm super excited today to have one of our special guests, Sandy Hutchison, and I'm really excited to be talking to her because she's someone that I connected with several years ago, and I watched her build her business from scratch, and she was someone who exited the corporate world, has a wonderful story to tell, and today I'm really excited that she's going to be sharing that with us. So if you're there, Sandy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Gavin. It's a real pleasure to be here. Look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So Sandy, you're someone I was following for a little while. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. And it was really interesting because at the time you started this business, this idea that you had from scratch. And I've seen it develop over the years, and it's been really wonderful to watch. But I want to go back and share your story with our listeners and our audience, because there's a lot of people out there that have ideas, that have things that they would like to do one day, but they're not sure when or how and if they can do it and things like that. So I hope that today in our chat, we can inspire people. We can share some really good pieces of or pearls of wisdom that you have, that can really get people off to a really great start at some point in the near future. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect. None of us get it perfectly right, and I'm happy to share, some of the things I think we've done well, but also some of the things that, maybe people shouldn't do. So,
yeah, absolutely, and we'll definitely get to some of those things as well. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sandy. You're currently in Melbourne, Victoria. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm in Melbourne, Victoria, working from home.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, yes.
Yeah, and you came from the corporate world. I mean, what was your background? I know you've got a lot of really great experience. How did you, or when did you decide to make that kind of transition into your own business?
So my background was a little bit mixed. I'm originally from Canada, and I studied and worked in politics, and then in the public service around when a lot of privatization was going on of government departments, and ended up moving to Australia because I met my future husband in London and moved here for a couple of years, and then 24 years later I'm still here, and I made the shift from the public sector and politics to the corporate sector, and I joined Mercer, and which is an HR consulting firm. And I ended up spending 16 years working there, and went from coming in as a consultant to being the first appointed female partner, the youngest partner, running our change management and communications business for Asia Pacific. Then moved into a role more broadly. Mercer's part of a company called Marsh McLennan, the parent company that owns Marsh Insurance and other professional services firms. So I moved into a HRD role for Asia Pacific, and that was my last role with the organization. I went from kind of in this really senior role, part of the talent pool on the succession plan for CEO, to a big restructure and change of my boss in New York, and all of a sudden I was made redundant, and that was a huge shock.
Yeah.
But turned out, in some hindsight, to probably be the best thing that happened to me, as a lot of people say, because it forced me then to reflect on what I wanted and what I was doing and where my passions were, and gave me a bit of breathing space to come up with the idea for Career Money Life.
That's really a great story, and I can resonate with that completely, because that's exactly what happened to me as well. I don't know if I mentioned this the last time we spoke, but being made redundant sometimes can be a blessing in disguise, or it gives you that push that you otherwise need to just get out of your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I think it's being able to see it that way, sometimes it takes a while to get that perspective on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get over the hurt and the the feeling of loss and people letting you down and all that. Yeah. Hindsight is a great thing. So you had a really strong corporate background. You were doing really well. You were, one of the youngest people in your sort of your field with what you were doing, and suddenly all of that was kind of taken away from you. I mean, at what point did you kind of think, gee, is it worth going back and trying to do all this again, or should I just do something on my own? I mean, I know you said you had some time to reflect and think about it, but were you tempted to kind of go back to corporate at some stage? I mean, because it's hard to sometimes let go of, what you've trained for your whole life, practically.
Look, it is, and there's a lot of, it's a lot of good things, a lot of bad things about working for big corporates. But one thing that there is that sense of belonging and a sense of stability.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always been really purpose driven. So, being part of a big global organization and the opportunities to learn from so many different people and to, have this sense of greater purposes was hard to kind of disconnect from. It probably took me a couple of years to stop using the word we when I referred to my old company.
I still do that.
Yeah. you just have that strong association with it. But so for me, I did take some time off. I had 2 young kids at the time, and I'd been in an Asia Pac role where I was traveling back and forth to China and other parts of Asia and to the US quite frequently. So it was incredibly full on. And so, just looking at all of those life priorities and being able to think about, what really mattered to me. And for me, I guess I kind of felt like I'd proven myself in that space. And so to just go back and do it again I get bored really easily. I'm kind of a very innovative, creative brain. And so to just go and do all that again seemed kind of pointless. It seemed like, well, what else is there out there that I can try? And how do I take all these great corporate skills and maybe apply them in a different context?
Right.
And that was, I guess, my thought process. And then I sort of came up with the actual idea of the business, and then that sort of then drove the decision making from there.
Fantastic. And I like what you said just then, which was, when you had this time to reflect, apart from coming up with the idea and, obviously, not wanting to go back and do the same thing again and again and be bored, you also kind of reevaluated your life priorities, right? So you had young kids at the time. So I suppose family and more of a work-life balance would have been something that was quite big on your priority list.
Absolutely. I kind of have this running joke though about running your own business, and I always say to people, the great thing about running your own business is you get to choose which 18 hours a day you want to work.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you that later on, because I know plenty of people who run their own business and they work longer hours than when they work corporate, because you don't just switch off sometimes, but you do control the environment, which is And
that is the difference, particularly if you've got a family. I always found the most stressful parts were when corporate requirements and family requirements conflicted, and you had this kind of moral dilemma of choosing between right and right. Both are important, both are right, both matter. How do I divide myself up? And, I can recall times being on, really big global conference calls at unusual times, because that's what happens when you work for a global company, and, on mute, changing dirty nappies and trying to, feed babies and do all these things and keep it all together. And I think that's the piece where the most stress comes. And so I think when you're able to choose what time you have meetings and choose when you work and choose when you walk away from work and not feel that kind of, the guilt or the need to be present or in the office and those sorts of things, there is a freedom in that. But I think if people, if you're starting their own business as something where they can just, work less, I'm kind of yet to see that, particularly in the early years. It's
definitely. Well, nothing comes out of nothing. I mean, you get what you put out, and definitely in the early days, if you're starting a business or you're putting something together, you've got to put the effort in, and the results will come, obviously, if you don't give up and you keep persisting. But, sometimes it's that delayed gratification, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where, it can be really challenging because you've got to have such strong self-belief
Yes.
in your idea, and the persistence and the perseverance, the grit to stick with it.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard. There's times when you have a lot of self-doubt and questions. Am I doing the right thing? Should I just go back and get a real job?
Right.
Yeah,
But you obviously,
absolutely.
you're someone that's really self-driven, and I, you said it earlier, you're very goal-oriented, you're very passionate about what you do. You've got these skills. So what would you say to people who are listening to this and they've got ideas, they've got something in the back of their mind, and they're really reevaluating their life priorities, and they're thinking, gee, I've been doing this for such a long time for someone else. I only get rewarded up to this. There's a ceiling. There's this glass ceiling, and I can do so much better. What would you say to someone like that? Should they explore their passions early on, or wait till something hits the fan and then go, what? Now I really need to self-reflect because I can't go back there, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, should people kind of look at this transition approach when times are good as opposed to when times are bad?
Look, I don't think there's any kind of definitive answers on these things. It's
Yeah.
really about your personal circumstances, and I think one thing that people need to be really careful of when they do step away from a secure salary and move into the startup space is that your cash flow, and thinking about how long and how much money you have to sustain yourself until you start actually earning profitable income.
Yeah.
And for most entrepreneurs, that's a lot longer than you will anticipate, because you'll think your idea is great and everyone will love it and they'll be flooding. But the reality is that doesn't happen in most cases. So, what you don't want to do is just jump in too quickly and, give up a good salary that's paying your mortgage and all these things.
Absolutely.
And put yourself under all this financial stress while at the same time trying to build a startup. So I think nowadays there's, it used to be so binary. People worked full-time or part-time, and, anything that was outside of that was considered moonlighting, and that was really bad to have
exactly.
2 jobs.
Yep.
And now there's so much, so many people have a side gig, or, so I would say if you've got a passion, keep it on the side, until you're in a position where you feel comfortable financially that you could sort of take that step. And I think sometimes that's why redundancy is a bit of a stepping stone for people, because they get a payout and there's an opportunity to sort of have a bit of space where you've got some income.
Yeah.
But I think, you can play around, you can test the idea, you can try it out on people, you can build something small, and there's so much great tech now and support for startups that you don't have to do it the old way. You don't need an office. You don't need to pay for a lot of expensive systems and things. You can get a lot of that free or very cheap. So the setup costs are a lot less, and you can sort of start small and build it out if you're not in a position where you can manage it. Because the worst thing to do is to start a business and then have it fold because you're not able to manage and sustain the financial side, and then you have to go back and find another job, and so you really need to be careful on that side of things. And that's, I guess, an area I see people not spending enough time. They're all excited about the idea, but you really need to make sure you're testing that you've actually got a market for this, testing that it's a profitable market, it's sustainable, there's growth, there's scale, all of those things, not just, I like it, so other people will too, type thinking.
Yeah. No, there's a great point. You actually listed quite a number of really, really good points in that, and thank you for that. One of the things you did say just then was cash flow is really key early on for the survival of your idea or business, when you're in startup phase. What were some of the big challenges you faced when you were getting your startup off the ground? Obviously, you have to manage your financial side, like you said. Were there any other things that you found personally when you were starting up that were really tough in the beginning that you had to kind of manage?
Yeah, there's quite a few things, really. So I guess, and it's important for people to reflect on, what are the things that they really valued about, their previous roles and what they did before. Because for me, I'm quite extroverted and I'm quite social, and so I really valued the social contact at work, and I had a huge network across this global company. And so I went from all this connectivity to basically me, and this idea, and it was painfully lonely and isolating. And that if you're extremely introverted, maybe that would work for you. But, most people who go into entrepreneurial pursuits are more extroverted and get their energy from others. So, I had to kind of rebuild a community around me of other entrepreneurs and other people that I could connect in with. And because otherwise it was just so incredibly lonely and isolating. And, that's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your confidence. All of those things. So that was certainly one thing that is really important to think about and quite deliberately build. I created an advisory board that I could connect in with. I had some programs that I joined in terms of having some mentors from different places at different points in time that were really helpful. And then, but I did find that there's this amazing community of people in the startup space that were so generous and so, willing to help you. I think kind of a related point to that is sometimes you'll think there's people that from the past that will have your back and, will be a great first customer and they'll let you down. And then at the same token, there'll be these amazing people that come out of the woodwork that have no reason to kind of help you other than their kindness of strangers. And people will be so generous and so helpful. And so on the one hand, it was like these amazing experiences where people were being, really supportive with their time and their advice. And then, but yet on the other hand, people that you thought you had a really strong connection with that, just didn't return your emails because all of a sudden you weren't someone who was a partner in a global consulting firm. You were Sandy from this business called Career Money Life that nobody had heard of. And, so you do kind of find out who your true friends are and you make some new friends, and that's really important.
Yeah. So everything you just said is what I went through as well, because like yourself, I was part of a large organization. I had a team. I used to have an Asia Pacific role. So I knew people in various countries, and you have this big network. And suddenly when you go into your own business, it's incredible how many people kind of, they remove yourself from that sphere because you're no longer part of that. So you kind of do feel isolated. And you mentioned, just being in touch with almost a community of like-minded people or mentors, or like you said, an advisory board that you set up. It's really critical to have or put people around you that will support you. And sometimes it's not the people you think will support you. It's people will come out of the woodwork, but you have to find some of those people.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to seek them out. But they are there.
They are there. Yeah. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your business, Sandy, because obviously, you put a lot on the line. You put in the hard yards. You've built this over the years. What is Career Money Life? Like, tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So I guess my idea for the business really came from my own experience with going through a redundancy. And I'd also been in my HR role, someone who had purchased the career transition services for employees in our organization that were being made redundant. And I felt that it was a area of the HR world that was largely a bit neglected and a bit out of date. It was very much come into the office, a very formulaic kind of model to support people, getting binders of material. And so what I wanted to do was really create an experience for people when they were going through what is often one of the most stressful and challenging periods of their life, being made redundant, that we actually honored them as a whole person and met their needs, both in terms of helping them figure out what their next steps were, whether it was starting a business or study or finding another job, but also understood that there's more to them than just their job. There's their sense of well-being. There's their connections back to their family, their financials. And so Career Money Life effectively is like a marketplace platform that enables employees who are going through a redundancy to access a whole suite of advice, content, tools, resources to help them with that process, and then can connect in with a whole range of fabulous suppliers, yourself included, where they can choose the kind of services and use the funds that have been provided by their company to get the services that best support their particular needs. So it's really about creating a, high value add employee / customer experience around this important life event. And that was where we started the business.
Right.
And sort of through working with clients and building it out, we're now offering programs in the transition to retirement space, which is another one of those kind of key life changes.
Oh, that's a key one, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And, really helping people think through those life priorities and building that bridge to what they're going to retire to rather than what they're retiring from, and really viewing it differently. And also around parental leave. So helping people through that transition stage to and back into the workforce. And, more broadly, we also offer employee assistance programs. So through our platform, people can access psychologists and get psychological counseling through work, as well as health and well-being programs. So it's broadened in terms of the kind of touch points along people's life cycle. But the principle of it is effectively it's this marketplace of great providers coupled with a content management system that provides, really relevant and timely content around those life events and pulls it all together in a way that can be really customized around an organization's needs. So that's kind of what Career Money Life is.
That's fantastic, Sandy. And I like how it's constantly evolved over time as well. So you haven't, you had an idea, but it's changing all the time. You're keeping up with people's needs and you're providing that really high level service. I mean, when I was made redundant many, many years ago now from the corporate world, I went to the typical outplacement agency, which was the place you went to, and people didn't, this is my experience. It wasn't the best because I was part of hundreds of people from my environment. This was during the global financial crisis, the GFC. And so, I worked for a large tech company at the time. And when I was made redundant, just from my company alone, there were over 500 employees that were made redundant that week. And there were many, many others. And so the market was saturated with people from that industry that were, let go. And these outplacement agencies, they couldn't handle the scale. And when you went in through their doors, they really had a very, very narrow focus on what they could help you with, and was really just, to be perfectly honest, how to tidy up your resume for your next job. And, there was just no support. There's no one you could really talk to. There was none of the stuff that you're talking about. So I think the fact that you've taken all of that into consideration and built this on an online platform, people can access, and they have this really great marketplace. I think it's a really, really awesome idea. I still don't know too many people that are doing something like that, so well done for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, look, it's, and I think for me, the piece that's so important, and it's something for your listeners to probably contemplate, is you need to make sure that, when you're developing a business idea, that it's something that you actually have some sort of expertise or knowledge in, but you also have to have some passion around it.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the three things. There's what you're good at, there's what you know, and there's what people will buy. And you need to find the crossover between all of those. But for me, I wake up every day excited to go to work because I'm so passionate, and particularly with current circumstances in the world, there's so much need for our services, and I see the impact and I see the feedback from people, and it is just so motivating to be able to help people and do something that's meaningful and making a difference. And I think that's so important that you really think carefully about what business you're going into, that it is aligned to your values, and it's something that you can, because you as the leader of that business need to be the cheerleader. You need to champion it. You need to believe in it. You need to be thinking about it day and night. And so you've got to have some passion around that. And it has to be much bigger than just, making money.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, because like you said, in the early days, you're probably going to see very little of that. So
yes, you need any at all.
That passion or that energy has to come from within. It can't just be, the paycheck, because, that might not come for several weeks or months, or in some cases, even a couple of years, and so there's got to be that inner drive. And I wanted to ask you just, around that, when you started up, I'm sure things didn't go perfectly well from day one, did they? You know, I'm sure
Of
you
course
had some
they did.
hurdles. Oh, okay. So you're one of the few people who actually got it right from day one.
Oh my God, I wish.
What were some of those maybe some common mistakes, but at the time you didn't know you were making them, that you made, that you could, you know, let some of our listeners know to potentially look out for or avoid?
So a few that come to mind. I think one is mistaking activity with progress and outcomes.
Yep.
So when you're in the startup, there's so many things you can do, and being able to define what are the priority things you need to do, and then determining whether you should do that yourself or whether you should hire someone else to do that because they'd actually do it faster and cheaper and better. But the inclination is to do everything yourself, which isn't always the right decision. But it's really easy to do lots of things that feel useful and good and productive, but they're not necessarily the really right things to be doing or the hard things to be doing.
Sure.
Like making sales calls or, you know, really testing your proposition and finding people that are going to be really critical of what you're doing so you can get that amazing feedback and refine your product and make it better. And I think there's so much out there. There's so much distraction on the internet. So you can get so involved in, you know, all this great stuff in the startup space, for instance, which is, I think, one of the things I did. And I, you know, was involved in a lot of the groups and reading, and there's some great stuff out there. And you'd read about this company getting funding or this company doing that. But at some point you have to go, how is that relevant to my business right now and my next set of, you know, priorities and goals that I need to get done this week? And I think you really need to be so disciplined about tracking and monitoring and being really clear on what your goals are each day, each week, assessing against that, and making sure they're the right goals that are actually going to lead you to the right outcomes, because there's a lot going on, and you can fool yourself that you're busy, but whether you're actually productive is a different thing.
I love that. Yeah. Being busy does not necessarily mean being productive. And I was 100% guilty of this when I started, because I wanted to do everything. So I got my hands in all these different activities and I was working crazy hours. And, you know, it wasn't until I had a mentor look at some of the stuff I was doing, and we had to strip back a lot of the activity, because most of that was never going to amount to anything. I was spinning these wheels, imaginary wheels, and I was, you know, trying to do everything that everyone else was doing, because I felt if I didn't, I was kind of letting myself down. And so, you know, I was busy, but yeah, you know, my productivity was really low, and I was doing a lot of the wrong activities, to be honest.
And look, I think it's really easy, because, you know, when you're in a job in a corporate, you have a defined role. You know what your role is, and you've got other people that are imposing deadlines on you, and you've got corporate you know, cycles. So when it's budget season or when it's high sales season, and that's all predetermined. But when you're creating something from scratch, you know, there's nothing to kind of work on, to cling to around it, cycles or business processes. You have to kind of create all that. And so it is really easy to find yourself a bit at sea, and it's so important. And I think related to that is the actual focus for what your business is, and being clear, it's this, and I'm doing this really well, and I'm going to do this better than anyone else, and this is how I'm going to differentiate from everybody else in terms of what I do, rather than trying to be a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because then you're nothing to anybody, and you're not differentiated, and pick something and stick with it. Have 3 products, not 20. And that, I think, is also hard, because you get asked for things and you think, oh, I could do that. But is that really the right thing to do? And what's the cost of doing that in terms of what your goals are, and the distraction time, and, you know, the learning curve, because you don't really know how to do that, but you got to figure it out. And it's hard to say no. It's absolutely hard to say no to things. So, and sometimes it's right, because sometimes it can take you on a pivot. Like, for instance, we had a conversation with a client that said, could your platform run employee assistance programs? And I'd never entered my mind. And I was like, yes, of course it can. Let me just go figure out how we're going to do that. And that's actually become, you know, quite a profitable revenue stream for us. And so you do need to be open to those opportunities, but you need to be careful.
Right. So it's not that you might not be able to do certain things. It's the timing. It's being careful where you put your focus and your time, and maybe the time is not right now to do everything, because there's so many hours in the day, and apart from all of this, you still have to have a life. You know, I mean, in your case, you still have kids and a family and all of these things. So saying no is one of the hardest things I ever had to learn. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Did you find that?
I'm still not great at it, but
yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing all of those. I'm sure, you know, the people that are listening to this are probably breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief, going, okay, I don't have to do everything, and I can pick and choose. I think that's probably healthier as well for you, you know, to do what you can in bite-sized chunks, manage your time really well, be disciplined, like you said, have focus, have some goals. And I think that'll steer you in a better direction. Talking about goals and direction, because that's what you mentioned last time. How important was it that you put some goals in place early on? I mean, when you first started, did you have goals, or is it something you had to learn how to kind of put in place for yourself?
Look, I think that's where having that corporate background, and particularly an organization like Mercer that was very, very full of actuaries, very detailed oriented, you learned a lot of really good corporate process. So, so you know, we had a detailed business plan. You know, we had detailed financials. We had quarterly reporting to the board, which was very much like a formal board meeting where we would, you know, report on everything and go through everything. And I think those sort of attributes of a corporate structure really helped keep me on track in terms of my own accountabilities. Even though they were a little bit, you know, fabricated. It's an advisory board. It's not a corporate board. We're not a listed company, but it still created that sense of shared accountability and a cycle to work towards. So, you know, by the next quarter, we need to get, you know, two more marquee clients on board. How are we going to do that? What's the strategy? Whereas if you don't have something that helps you build those cycles, I think things can just get a bit too loose. So goal setting is really important. I think you have to have the visionary goals. So I'm always been really innovative, big picture, always coming up with all the ideas kind of thing, which drives the rest of the people in the business crazy, particularly the tech team, when I was like, let's do this, let's do that. And they're like, okay, but we've got these 20 things to do first. So what's your priority? And so you do need those people with those different mindsets around you. But so you need those visionary goals, because that's what drives you and motivates you and gives you energy. But you need the incremental goals along the way. So what are the steps? And the goals where that's a goal, but it's not a now goal, it's a sometime goal. So I'm not even, and I think the tricky bit is to not put any effort into that goal right now. And that's where you have to say, no, I'm not going to read all this stuff. Maybe keep it all in a folder or a file, but I'm not going to get distracted by going down that rabbit hole right now, because that's in 3 years. We're going to be ready for that.
Yes.
And that's, again, it's about discipline to manage that. And it's hard. It is hard.
It is hard, but like you said, you know, if you came from a corporate background, one of the strengths, I guess, for people, you know, you can take from being in an environment like that, and so pretty much almost all our listeners are corporate people. You know, one of the great traits that you can take out is that you've come from a structured environment. So if you're going to create a business, it's great to put some structure into it, because, you know, otherwise you're going from structure to chaos, and our minds just really go all over the place when we don't have any structure. And because you're the leader really in your business, you've got to create that structure, but it's not something you don't know about. You know, you've had experience, so you can leverage that experience and start to put little bits of structure incrementally and kind of build a plan, long-term plan. And then, like you said, you know, you have your incremental, maybe daily, weekly goals, and then you have your sometime goals maybe in the future, which I really like, because you do have time frames, and not everything has to be done today.
And that's I think that's the hardest part, is what is business critical this week, and how do I make sure I make the time for that, And it's not just the time for the reactive stuff, it's the time for the proactive things. So,
Yes.
for my business, I sell to corporate HR. So they're not an easy buyer. They're very busy people. They get lots of people knocking on their door with new and innovative HR tech.
Yes.
So, choosing to be at the right events or on the right webinars or meeting with those people, and how you go about doing that, and how much time you spend on your social media and LinkedIn and all the different ways you can connect with them. It's being really structured and deliberate about who your audience is, who you're selling to, what you're selling. And that's, again, if people have come from a corporate environment where they've had systems that have managed clients, and they've got processes around sales cycles. Those things apply equally in the startup world. I mean, you can use a lighter version than what corporates do, but the principles that sit behind it are the same in terms of thinking about things from a process point of view. And I think the more you can implement those right from the start and set yourself up with good practice to begin with, even if it feels a little, maybe a little heavy to begin with, you've got to start by thinking about the end game. So I always say we've got to build for scale, so we've got to build it now for when we're, when we don't have 10 employees on, but we've got 10,000 or 100,000. And, obviously systems and processes need to evolve and change, but if you start with that end in sight, I think you build things that are more robust and help build that discipline in for you, so you're not relying purely on your own,
really
internal self-discipline.
Yeah, definitely. And this whole thing about discipline and, mindset and having goals and prioritizing your time, when it comes to, say, in your life, Sandy, I mean, how do you manage your work-life balance? Because obviously, you've got 10,000 things that you're trying to manage in the business, but you've also got people to help you. But then you've got your family and you've got your outside interests outside of the business. And, how important is it to make sure right from the beginning that you instill with that discipline a sense of work-life balance as well? I know in the beginning it's not that easy, but how do you kind of manage it?
Look, I think for me the two things that are most important to me, and I think that you need to be really clear on what your priorities are. So my family, my kids, my family, my husband, my dog, and my, and my business and my close friendships that I have. And so it's really each day, how do I put the right amount of time into those things? And some days, the whole work-life balance, I always think it's more like, it's more like a work-life smoothie where it's all just blended together. And
that's a good one.
my day, and I'll get up and sort the kids, make sure they're at the door, throw a load of laundry and grab some breakfast, start work all day, but if I need to go pick up the kids for something, and my daughter's a rower, so we've got a lot of 5 a.m. starts to get her rowing and things like that. So it's just kind of every day working through all the juggles and making sure it works. And I think the thing is that when you're really passionate about your business, it is always on your mind. So it is hard to turn it off, and it's hard to have that time away from it, but you really do need it, because often I find what happens is when I do get away and I go for a walk down the beach or something, that's when these great ideas come to you. So it's that working in versus working on.
Definitely.
And sometimes, it might seem like a guilty treat to take some time away from work or go for a walk or have a little holiday and things like that. But it's amazing sometimes what will come from that when your brain is refreshed and it's seeing different things, or it's thinking about things in a different way, or you're just more rested. So you have to look after yourself, because in a corporate, if you get sick, there's a whole team of people to fill in and support you, and you probably got some sick leave and some other things, where if you get sick in a startup, things are just going to come to a grinding halt. So you need to protect yourself as an asset of the business. Key man risk, key woman risk, and
I like that.
View yourself as an asset, and that you need to be taken care of.
So,
but it's not easy. In terms of, most of my days, I do all that early stuff. I work all day. I stop about 5:30. I do dinner, and have time with the kids, help with homework. And then I usually hop back on about 8:30 and work for another couple hours. And then maybe have an hour of Netflix. And that's my day.
Well, sometimes you just need time you need mindless activity to tune off, don't you? Because it's important to actually tune off. Or, I talk to people who sometimes they say it's just really great to get out there in the fresh air and ground yourself, or just connect back with nature, or, do something that completely takes your mind off the work. And and sometimes it's hard when you're starting off. Your mind's always on it. If you're not working in the business, you're working on the business, or you're thinking about things. But sometimes it's just really good to tune out, and exercise can be a great thing. Meditation, and I'm sure you probably factor some of these things in, but just looking after your general health is important.
Absolutely, your diet, and I do exercise in there as well a few days a week. But yeah, absolutely. Like they're actually talking about what they call the green prescription now, where doctors are prescribing to people who have mental health issues or depression, or just life challenges, time in green environments. And it's been proven that it's almost as effective as antidepressants. And even just the green color, when it hits your eye, sends positive chemicals to your brain, makes you happier, fresh air. Yeah. So it is really important to make sure you're doing those things.
No, that's really great. Yeah. It's a lot more than just, business. It's really everything. And would you say it's important to have people around you that's supportive? So especially if you've got a family environment, I'm sure your family support you. If mom needs to do something between 8 and 9 p.m., the family get it. Like they understand why you're doing it. And, just having that family support, or having a partner or someone that is supportive of you, it's really critical. Because like you said, otherwise you're kind of on your own.
Yeah. Look, it can be very lonely, and it is really important. I mean, in my case, my husband is also the head of tech and finance for the business, as a part-time job, and then he has a real job as well. So that's a whole other challenge when you're actually working in the business as a couple, because it's great that you have this thing to do and this thing in common, but then it's also very difficult to define where the boundaries between work and home begin and end. So that can create challenges as well.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Well, Sandy, what I wanted to do now is kind of shift gears a little bit, because you've shared a lot of great stuff, and I've been taking notes as well. I hope, if you're listening to this, you've been sort of jotting down a few things, or if there's a few things you might want to go back and listen to again. But now what I wanted to do is just kind of pick your brain really quickly, just to see, how, what are some of the ways you think and operate like on the fly. And so it's a section we call rapid response. And I do this with everyone that we talk to, and it's really just to get a few quick nuggets out of you. So if you're happy to do that, we'll kick off with that section. Yep.
Sure.
Okay. So what's your favorite mode of learning?
I'm an on-the-job learner. I like learning by doing, experiential.
Experiential. I love that. So it could be, yeah. So I know a lot of people that we talk to, they some prefer listening, some prefer reading, some prefer watching video, all of that. Do you have a mix of all of that, or are you more of one or the other?
Yeah, probably. Look, I'm a big reader, but probably more in terms of like fiction reading, but more in terms of read a little bit, try a little bit, chat to someone about it. So it's very very kind of mixed. I'm not good at just sitting and maybe watching, a whole online video about something and then sort of slavishly practicing each of those tools or something. I'm probably a little more fragmented in my approach.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Favorite role model or hero?
So I guess one of my role models, given I was a student of political science, is a character from a book, Dagny Taggart, who's from the book Atlas Shrugged, by Ayn Rand. And this was written back in the 50s, and this was just this incredibly strong, not everyone would love her politics, but incredibly strong, smart, independent, totally taking responsibility for herself and her own actions woman. from a time when those didn't really exist, and I guess her character kind of always stuck with me.
Wonderful. Oh, you can probably hear my dog in the background.
I can hear.
I'm just going to.
I've got one of those too.
Yeah, I'm just going to pause for 2 seconds while she just gets it all out of her system, because I think someone their dog right past our door. But no, that's okay. What about a favorite quote? Do you have a favorite quote?
Favorite quote? I do. It's from Audrey Hepburn.
Oh yeah.
And it's, nothing is impossible. The word itself says, I'm possible.
I love that. That is fantastic.
Yeah, I've always liked that one.
Yeah. And what about a cause or charity that you either sponsor or support or care about?
Yeah, I guess I'm on the board of the Australian Gender Equality Council, which is looking at improving gender equality across, the workplace, society, the political sphere. So that's always been something that I've been heavily involved in my past career around diversity and equal rights for women and others in the workforce. So I do manage to fit in time to be on that board and do things related to that board, which is a real passion of mine. I'm also one of the mentors for the RMIT, has a sort of entrepreneur program. So I'm one of the mentors for that's my second time doing that. So I do that as well.
So this is where you can give back now, some of your time to helping people, other organizations, causes that you deeply believe in.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. And this is something, it's up to you how much or what you want to share, but is there anything quirky or something funny about you that maybe our listeners, don't know, that you'd like to perhaps share with them?
Oh, I'm struggling with this one. I guess one thing it's a little odd is that my mother, myself, and my daughter and my son all have completely different accents, which is kind of unusual because my mother is Scottish and moved to Canada, and I was born in Canada and then moved to Australia. So when we're together, people can't figure it out because my mom's got a Scottish Canadian accent. I've got a Canadian Australian accent.
Yep.
And my kids have an Aussie accent. So
that would be really interesting.
It's very confusing. Yeah.
Well, you're truly a global person, Sandy. So what can we say?
Yeah.
Now, and I guess, look, in wrapping up, we've talked about a lot of different great topics. I'm really, really happy that you shared what you shared, because even I feel like I've learned stuff just by listening to you say it. And this journey that you're on started from a simple idea. Where do you see it taking you now? Like, have you got more? I'm sure you've got more plans to keep going and growing and things like that. But is there anything that we can keep an eye out for the future with what you're doing?
Yeah, look, we're with the current environment, we've been really busy with lots of career transition work, which is obviously sad for those individuals, but we're doing our best to support them. Our biggest client is Virgin, and we've been so privileged to work with that amazing team, and we really see ourselves, I guess, moving to that position where now we can scale, we're still in the Australia-New Zealand market, but I think in the next few years we'll be looking at potentially expansion into other markets and other countries, but also expanding here in terms of the volume. And the platform was always built for that, so that's really exciting to be in a position to be working with those top leading companies in Australia, supporting organizations at scale. One of the other really exciting innovations that we've just developed recently is that we now have the capability for companies to directly list job vacancies and recruiting campaigns on our platform, and have employees have their profiles on the platform and then provide a matching service. So it means for employees that are looking for work, right from the career transition platform, where we can help them get ready in terms of their CVs and their interview prep, but also connect them with employers that are looking for their skill sets, and add that value back to those employers as well in terms of tapping into this fantastic talent pool, for a company like Virgin, everyone knows they're incredibly well trained. They've come from a fantastic culture, so they're a highly desirable employee. But it's like, how do companies then connect? They know they're out there. Sure. So we've just launched that in the last couple of weeks, and we're really excited about the potential to create this sort of new talent pool opportunity for both the candidate side and the employers. So that's kind of where we're heading. And I think that's, one thing, you always need to be aware of the market and willing to innovate and respond to changing market conditions.
That's wonderful. That's really great. I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for some of the stuff that you're working on, because I think you're definitely heading in that direction that's serving a lot more people and helping and providing that much needed service. So congratulations on that. And how would our listeners get in touch with you or your business? Like, what's the best way for them to connect?
So in terms of the business itself, the website is www.careermoneylife.com. And people can contact me at sandy.hutchison, HUTCHISON, at careermoneylife.com. And I'm also available on mobile, 0404 800 883, or LinkedIn. So lots of ways to connect. I'd love to hear from people if they're either been made redundant and thinking about this, or looking for some services and support. We do work with individuals on the business as well as people coming through corporate. So.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for spending this time with us, Sandy. I really appreciate it. And, I loved hearing from you and hearing all the things that you've been working on and how you got started, and just sharing your story in general. And I hope it really inspires all of you that are listening, that it is possible to start something from scratch, whatever the idea may be. And if you believe in yourself and you give yourself, you back yourself up, and you stick with it, and you work smart, not necessarily harder, but smarter. Anyone can do it. It is possible.
Absolutely, it's possible. It's a lot of hard work, but it's absolutely possible. Thank you so much, Gavin.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Sandy.
If you like this podcast and would like to understand a little bit more about what was just discussed, then you're in luck. Simply head over to breakfreefromcorporate.com, and we have a fantastic bonus gift waiting for you to download. All we ask in return is that you leave us a review on iTunes and or Stitcher, whichever you use. And lastly, help us share this podcast around with your friends, your colleagues, through Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or LinkedIn. We truly appreciate all your support, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode of Break Free from Corporate. Once again, to access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.